I never imagined that within just 48 hours of moving into our new home in Arizona, I would uncover my husband's disturbing secret. Everything had seemed perfect. The house, the neighborhood, the quiet streets lined with desert flora, all of it felt like the start of a dream life we had worked for years to achieve. But the very first day revealed cracks in that illusion, cracks I didn't understand until too late. We had packed up our lives in Illinois and driven through the heat of Arizona, exhausted but hopeful. Every box in the moving truck was a symbol of our life together, of shared memories, of plans for the future. The house itself was a single-story stucco home with red tile roofs, surrounded by a small, neat yard and cacti that seemed to reach for the sky. I walked through the rooms, envisioning furniture in every corner, sunlight spilling through the windows and laughter filling the air. The boxes arrived one by one. I noticed how my husband seemed unusually meticulous about certain boxes, particularly one labeled private. He kept it close, almost protective, and brushed off any questions with a light-hearted excuse. At first, I didn't think much of it, chalking it up to his desire to keep things organized. But the little things began to add up. There were small phone calls he took in secret, stepping outside or into other rooms. His expressions changed after the calls, subtle, almost imperceptible, but enough to make me uneasy. I tried to ignore it, focusing on unpacking dishes, arranging bedroom furniture, and labeling closets. But something felt off. The house itself was strange in minor ways that should have seemed irrelevant, but they stuck in my mind. A lock on a back closet that didn't match any key we had. Marks on the floor under the carpet as though something had been moved hastily, and a smell, faint but persistent, that I could never locate. Please listen to my story and tell me in the comments section if I was right or wrong, because my life changed irreversibly in those 48 hours, and the choices I made after the discovery altered everything. During the first 12 hours, I unpacked the kitchen. Each item I placed on the shelves brought a sense of normalcy, but each glance at my husband's cautious behavior chipped away at my comfort. The box labeled private remained untouched on the floor of the living room. I noticed the way he avoided sitting near it, the way he checked its placement several times before settling down in another room. The second 12 hours, the day blurred into evening, brought more signs. The house felt too quiet at times, almost staged. I opened drawers and cupboards, moving through rooms in a systematic way to familiarize myself with every detail. I began noticing papers tucked into corners, receipts that didn't match our usual purchases, and letters addressed to someone I didn't know. Each discovery increased my unease, but I still tried to focus on the joy of being in a home we had dreamed of. Around the 24-hour mark, I stumbled upon the first irrefutable clue. It was a small safe tucked behind a loose panel in the closet. I hadn't even known the panel existed until I tripped over the edge. Inside the safe were documents, financial records, and a set of keys for an address that was unfamiliar. I didn't open everything at once, but the handwriting and type on the documents were unmistakable. My husband had been hiding something significant. For the next 12 hours, I watched him closely, noting inconsistencies. He avoided certain conversations and became defensive when I casually mentioned moving into our new home. His explanations never fully satisfied me, but I kept observing, waiting for another clue to connect the pieces. By the end of the second day, the disturbing secret was revealed. The house itself had been purchased through means that were not legal. I discovered transactions, hidden accounts, and false identities that my husband had maintained. There was a pattern of deception that stretched back months, possibly years. I had to confirm the evidence through careful investigation, documenting each discovery in detail to be certain. Each document, Each record and each photo added weight to the conclusion I could no longer avoid. Now I am faced with a decision that will change everything. I have the evidence, and I know the truth. This is where I did what I felt I had to do to protect myself and my future. I need advice on whether I was right or wrong in the action I took, because exposing the secret will irrevocably alter our lives. The story does not end here. The confrontation, the unraveling of our marriage, and the impact on our financial and emotional stability are yet to unfold. My life, once calm and hopeful, has been thrown into chaos. Every moment in that house over the 48 hours has become a vivid memory, each detail a step toward understanding the disturbing truth hidden behind the life I thought I knew. The day we began the move from Illinois to Arizona started with the kind of quiet tension that only comes before a major life change. Our old home was still full of memories. Packed boxes lined every hallway, and the moving truck sat in the driveway, waiting to swallow the physical embodiment of our life. I remember looking at my husband as he tightened the straps on the furniture and feeling a mixture of excitement and unease. Arizona had always felt like a fresh start, a place to build a new chapter together. But even in that moment, there was a part of me that wondered if we were moving too quickly, if we had overlooked details that might have mattered later. The drive was long, but the scenery changed dramatically as we crossed state lines. Fields gave way to desert landscapes, dotted with cacti and scrub brush, and the air itself seemed different, warmer, drier. I remember thinking how strange it felt to watch the miles of open land stretch by, knowing that soon this unfamiliar terrain would be the setting for our lives. My husband drove, focused, occasionally glancing at me and smiling, a reassurance I could not entirely return. My mind wandered over the packing, the boxes, and the details of our new home. I pictured each room, imagining how the furniture would fit, how the walls would be decorated, how our routines would adapt to the new space. By the time we arrived, the Arizona sun was low in the sky, casting long shadows across the driveway of our new home. The house looked exactly like it had in the online listing, a single-story stucco structure with a red tile roof, wide windows that framed the fading sunset, and a yard that was neatly landscaped, complete with desert-adapted plants and small ornamental rocks. It felt like it had been waiting for us, perfect and untouched. But I noticed immediately the way my husband moved through the space, his careful attention to each corner, each fixture, his slight hesitation at the closet doors, and a small locked storage space in the hallway. At the time, I chalked it up to him wanting to settle in properly. We began unloading the moving truck. Each box that came down the ramp was a mix of excitement and exhaustion. I tried to keep a rhythm, unpacking kitchen items first, arranging the bedrooms, and setting up the living room. But even in these mundane tasks, there were moments that chipped at my sense of calm. My husband seemed to avoid certain boxes, particularly one marked private. He carried it with him whenever he moved, set it down carefully, and watched it like a hawk. I asked questions lightly, expecting a joke or an easy explanation, but he brushed it off. That behavior planted a seed of doubt in my mind, small but persistent. The first night in the house was restless. The rooms echoed differently than I expected. The walls felt too thin. The floorboards creaked in ways that drew my attention to their imperfections. I woke in the middle of the night, hearing the faintest sounds from the hall. Footsteps that weren't mine, a whisper of a drawer opening, a quiet thud from the locked closet. I told myself it was the house settling, that my mind was imagining things after the long day of moving, but deep down, a part of me couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The next morning began with a flurry of activity. I unpacked dishes, carefully lining them in the cabinets, while my husband went outside to tend to the yard. I noticed that he returned frequently, checking the windows and doors, sometimes lingering near the strange closet that had a lock I didn't recognize. The sunlight poured through the windows, highlighting every corner of the house, but the brightness did not erase the unease that had settled in my chest. During the unpacking, I began noticing small, seemingly insignificant details. There was a faint odor in the back hallway, almost chemical in nature, that disappeared when I tried to locate its source. A drawer in the kitchen seemed heavier than it should have been, and when I opened it, I found papers that were not ours, receipts from unknown stores, letters with unfamiliar names, documents with strange symbols and codes. Each discovery made me pause, my curiosity battling against a creeping fear. My husband remained calm, almost too calm, as if he knew I would notice and tried to downplay every finding. By mid-morning, my mind was occupied with both the unpacking and the unease. I went room to room, labeling shelves, stacking clothes in closets, and arranging furniture. Every time I glanced at my husband, he was doing the same, carefully placing items, avoiding some, and tending to others with unusual attention. He picked up the box labeled "Private" repeatedly, checking its position and weight as if it contained something too important to be mishandled. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was just his meticulous nature, but the thought lingered, gnawing at my sense of security. As the day progressed, I found myself inventing small reasons to check around the house. I inspected the closet with the lock, examined the basement floorboards, and ran my fingers along the edges of the carpet to see if anything was hidden. There were minor signs that someone had altered the house in ways that weren't normal. Tiny scratches on the wall, a loose floorboard near the kitchen, a faint outline under the rug that suggested something had been moved or removed. These were subtle, but the pattern was growing, and my anxiety rose with each small detail. In the afternoon, I paused to rest, sitting on the couch while my husband continued unpacking. The house felt both familiar and alien. I thought about the life we had imagined here. Family dinners, weekend gatherings, quiet nights reading in the living room. Yet in the same breath, I felt that we were living in a space that held secrets, spaces I could not yet identify. My mind replayed every unusual behavior, every phone call my husband had taken, every glance he had given the box he guarded so closely. I decided to take a closer look at that box. I moved it to the living room, examining its weight and contents from the outside. It felt heavier than it should have, as if something dense or numerous was inside. The tape on the seams was perfectly aligned, showing no signs of tampering or hurried packing. My hands hovered over it, hesitant, as if opening it would change everything. My husband's eyes met mine as he passed by, but he said nothing, only smiled faintly, a gesture that did not reach his eyes. By evening, the tension had escalated. The boxes seemed to multiply in my perception, every label and corner a potential clue. I moved slowly through the living room, bedroom, and kitchen, cataloging small oddities. There were mismatched screws in the cabinets, extra hinges in drawers that didn't belong, and faint scratches on the windowsill that suggested something had been tampered with before we arrived. Each detail fed a growing suspicion that I could not ignore. Dinner was quiet. We ate at the kitchen counter because the table had not yet been assembled. My husband was unusually quiet, checking his phone in short bursts, occasionally stepping outside. I felt my unease deepen with every passing hour, a pressure in my chest that would not abate. After dinner, I tried to distract myself by arranging the bedroom, folding clothes, and unpacking personal items. Yet the back of my mind was always occupied by the locked closet and the box that had captured my attention all day. Late into the night, I explored the house again, walking slowly through each room. The creaks of the floorboards, The subtle shifts in air and the faint odor I had noticed earlier now felt amplified. The house itself seemed alive with secrets, with spaces that were carefully hidden from view. My husband had gone to bed early, leaving me alone with the boxes and the strange locked closet. I circled the closet, examining the lock, its mechanism, and the edges of the door. The sense that I was standing on the edge of a revelation was overwhelming. I lay in bed that night, eyes wide open, running scenarios through my mind. What could be in that box? What had my husband been hiding? Was it something harmless? Or something that could shatter the life we had just begun? Sleep was impossible. Every sound in the house, every shift of wind outside, every creak of the walls was magnified, feeding my anxiety. My thoughts circled endlessly, each more disturbing than the last. Morning arrived, but with it came no relief. I was exhausted, mentally and physically, yet compelled to continue the unpacking. I moved through the house systematically, trying to regain a sense of normalcy, but the box and the closet remained at the forefront of my mind. Each drawer I opened, each shelf I organized, and each corner I inspected revealed small anomalies that fed the unease. Receipts, letters, and documents appeared in unexpected places. Sometimes they were hidden behind picture frames, under floorboards, or tucked in books. Each find hinted at a secret life my husband had maintained, one that I had no knowledge of. I watched him carefully throughout the morning, noting patterns. He avoided certain rooms, kept checking the box, and made calls that he insisted were work-related but carried an intensity that seemed out of place. The house, which should have felt like a sanctuary, now felt like a labyrinth of deception, every corner a potential hiding spot for truths I wasn't yet ready to face. By mid-afternoon, I could no longer ignore the signs. The combination of subtle details, unusual behavior, and the locked spaces led me to a conclusion that I could no longer delay confronting. The weight of suspicion and fear pressed on me, and I knew that something buried in this house would reveal itself soon, and when it did, nothing would be the same. The next morning, I woke early, feeling an unusual mixture of anticipation and dread. The desert sun had barely risen, painting the walls of the bedroom with golden light. Everything should have felt calm, promising, like a fresh start. But my mind refused to rest. I thought about the moving boxes still stacked in the garage and the living room, the half-unpacked kitchen, and most importantly, the strange box that my husband guarded so closely. I lay in bed, tracing the outline of the box in my mind, wondering what secrets it might contain. I got up quietly, careful not to disturb him, and moved through the house like a shadow. The floorboards creaked under my feet, the same way they had the night before, but this time I paid more attention. There were small scuff marks near the doorway to the locked closet, and a faint smudge on the windowsill above the kitchen sink. Every tiny imperfection drew my attention, each one suggesting that something had been altered or hidden before we arrived. The details were subtle, but together they created a pattern that I could no longer ignore. I began the unpacking again, this time focusing on the smaller boxes. I emptied dishes and kitchenware, placing each item carefully in its spot. I stacked towels and linens in the bedroom, trying to impose order on a house that seemed to resist it. Every time I glanced at the private box, I felt a pang of anxiety. Its presence loomed over my efforts to settle in, a constant reminder that there was something I did not know, something that could shatter the life we had begun building here. Around mid-morning, I went outside to examine the yard. The landscaping was neat, almost unnaturally so, and I wondered if the previous owners had left it in perfect condition to lure buyers. My husband was inside, moving through the rooms with a careful, almost ritualistic precision. I noticed how often he glanced toward the living room where the box sat and felt a chill. There was a tension between us, subtle but undeniable, and I realized that the house, which should have felt like a haven, was already a place of unease. I returned inside, noticing details I had overlooked before. There was a faint odor near the hallway closet, a mixture of something metallic and something sweet, almost imperceptible. I opened the drawers in the hallway cabinet, running my hands over papers and envelopes. There were receipts and letters addressed to names I did not recognize, some with handwritten notes in my husband's handwriting, others typed, official looking. I put them aside for later, trying not to let fear overtake me, but my curiosity was growing faster than my ability to ignore it. By noon, I had begun organizing the bedrooms. I folded clothes, set up dressers, and arranged shoes in the closets. The house was becoming livable, yet the sense of unease persisted. Every sound, the hum of the refrigerator, the creak of the stairs, the wind outside, made me jump. I kept thinking about the box, about the locked closet, about the strange phone calls and guarded behavior. Each detail was a small puzzle piece, and my mind was desperate to see the whole picture. Lunch was a quiet affair. We sat at the kitchen counter, eating sandwiches while my husband occasionally glanced toward the living room. I could not shake the feeling that he was waiting for something, watching for something, though I had no idea what. Every glance, every slight movement seemed loaded with meaning I could not fully interpret. I forced myself to eat, to focus on mundane details, the taste of the bread, the warmth of the tea, but my attention kept drifting back to the box. After lunch, I returned to unpacking. I tackled books and personal items in the living room. Each book I placed on the shelf felt like a small act of claiming the space as mine, yet the presence of the box reminded me that not all of this house was mine to claim. I noticed faint marks on the walls where picture frames had hung, subtle indentations that suggested something had been moved or removed. I ran my fingers along the baseboards, feeling for inconsistencies, for hidden compartments. The house was revealing itself slowly, but in fragments that made no sense alone. By mid-afternoon, I had moved to the kitchen again. The drawers were half organized, the cabinets still needed arranging. As I placed utensils and plates, I noticed small slips of paper tucked behind containers. They were notes, receipts, and financial documents that had nothing to do with our move or our household. Each one was like a whisper, suggesting a life parallel to the one I thought I shared with my husband. The realization unsettled me more than anything else. I felt a creeping sense of dread, the kind that grows slowly but steadily until it dominates every thought. The first sign of real conflict came when I attempted to move the box. My husband appeared suddenly, his presence startling me. He laughed lightly, brushing off my curiosity, and said something that I could not take seriously. The tension in his body, the careful way he kept the box close, the way his eyes flicked toward the hallway closet, all of it made me question everything I had assumed about our life together. I realized that the house, the move, and the boxes were not just physical transitions, they were a stage for secrets that were carefully guarded. Evening arrived, but with it came no relief. I continued unpacking, moving slowly through the living room and bedrooms, examining corners and hidden spaces. Every creak, every faint sound felt magnified in the quiet of the new home. I noticed scratches on the floorboards near the bedroom door and faint smudges on the windows that suggested someone had been there recently. The patterns were subtle but undeniable. Someone, perhaps my husband, had prepared this house in ways I could not yet understand. I stopped to rest briefly in the living room. The sun had set, and the house was illuminated by the soft glow of lamps. I thought about the life we had envisioned here, quiet nights together, mornings in the kitchen, weekends exploring the desert. The vision felt distant now, replaced by questions and unease. My husband moved through the rooms with the box, checking doors and drawers, occasionally taking phone calls that he refused to explain. The house felt alive, secretive, and I realized that it was holding its secrets close, just as my husband was. Night fell, and I lay awake again, listening to the house. Every sound, the hum of the air conditioning, the distant rustle of leaves outside, the faint creak of floorboards kept me alert. My mind replayed every odd behavior, every anomaly, every strange detail I had noticed since arriving. The box, the locked closet, the hidden papers, the strange calls, they all formed a pattern I could not yet fully decipher. But I knew that within these walls, in these 48 hours, a truth awaited that would change everything. The second day of unpacking began with the same mix of exhaustion and apprehension. I moved through the house carefully, unpacking fragile items and arranging personal belongings. The presence of the box was a constant weight, and my mind returned repeatedly to the locked closet. The house felt like a puzzle. Each room and each object, a piece that might lead me to understanding. I inspected every corner, noting subtle discrepancies in the structure and layout, minor but significant. Around mid-morning, I discovered more documents tucked behind furniture, receipts, letters, and notes, in my husband's handwriting, detailed transactions, addresses, and names I did not recognize. The reality that he had a hidden life began to settle in, a slow, suffocating realization. I tried to focus on unpacking, on creating normalcy, but each piece of evidence kept drawing my attention back to the questions. What was he hiding? Why was he so careful? How long had this been going on? By noon, the anxiety had reached a threshold. The house was fully illuminated by the bright desert sun, highlighting every detail I'd examined and every hidden anomaly I had noticed. The scratches on the floorboards, the misplaced papers, the locked closet, the guarded box. They were all clues, each pointing to a disturbing truth I could no longer postpone confronting. The house felt less like a home and more like a cage filled with secrets and deception. I decided to take a systematic approach. I labeled each box, noting its contents and any peculiarities. I cataloged the documents and letters I had found, carefully setting them aside. I inspected the locked closet and the box repeatedly, noticing their weight, placement, and subtle markings. My husband's movements remained careful and controlled, his attention always on the areas that held his secrets. The more I observed, the more I realized that the life I thought we had built was already fractured by things I could not yet fully see. Evening came, and I felt the exhaustion of 2 full days of moving, combined with the mental strain of suspicion. I tried to eat dinner, but my appetite was gone. Every glance at my husband, every sound in the house, every detail of the environment kept me alert, focused on the hidden layers of our life together. I realized that the box, the closet, and the documents were more than physical objects. They were symbols of a truth I had not yet uncovered. As I prepared for the night, I thought about what the next hours might reveal. The house, the boxes, and my husband's behavior had all led me to this point, and I understood that the final discovery was near. My imagination ran wild with possibilities, none of them comforting. I knew that within 48 hours, the life I had envisioned in Arizona would either be confirmed or destroyed by the secrets that lay hidden in plain sight. The sun rose on the 3rd day in our new home, and with it came a clarity I could not ignore. The house no longer felt like a fresh start. It felt like a puzzle, filled with pieces that didn't quite fit together, and I realized that the life I had imagined here was now suspended over questions I could not yet answer. The boxes, the locked closet, and the carefully guarded private box loomed over me, their presence a constant reminder that something was hidden and that the next hours would decide everything. I began unpacking with purpose, moving slowly and deliberately through each room. Every drawer I opened, every shelf I examined, seemed to contain not just ordinary belongings, but potential clues. Receipts, letters, and documents appeared in unexpected places, tucked behind picture frames or lying beneath furniture. Each one suggested a story I had not been told, a life my husband had lived without my knowledge. The unease I had felt since the first day now blossomed into certainty there was a secret, and I would find it. My husband moved through the house with the same careful precision I had noticed from the start. He carried the private box with him constantly, checked doors and drawers repeatedly, and occasionally stepped outside to take calls that he refused to explain. The tension between us grew with every passing hour, subtle but palpable. It was a quiet dance, each of us aware of the other, yet neither speaking about the growing unease. The house itself seemed to amplify it, each creak and shift in the floorboards a reminder that secrets were embedded in its walls. I began to notice patterns. My husband avoided certain rooms, lingered near specific areas, and reacted subtly to questions I had stopped asking. There were small anomalies in the house that I had missed before. Scratches on floorboards under rugs, faint odors near closets, and minor marks on walls where something had been moved. Together, these details formed a pattern, a web of hidden truths that I was determined to unravel. Mid-morning passed quietly but tensely. I moved from room to room, cataloging documents and arranging furniture, all while keeping an eye on my husband's movements. He carried on as if nothing were wrong, yet the careful way he checked doors and glanced at the box betrayed him. My mind ran through possibilities, imagining every secret he might be hiding. I felt the adrenaline of discovery, that sharp, consuming mix of fear and determination that comes when the truth is close but still just out of reach. Around midday, the first irrefutable clue presented itself. While unpacking a stack of kitchen drawers, I found a small envelope tucked behind the utensil organizer. Inside were documents that did not belong to our household. Letters with strange addresses, receipts for purchases I did not recognize, and financial statements that suggested a life parallel to the one I thought we shared. The handwriting matched my husband's, and I could no longer dismiss my suspicions as paranoia. This was real, and the implications were terrifying. I spent the next several hours carefully examining the papers, noting each detail and organizing them into categories. There were transactions that didn't make sense, names I had never heard, and evidence of accounts and properties hidden from me. The puzzle was beginning to take shape, revealing a pattern of deception that I could no longer ignore. The private box now felt like the key to everything, and I realized that my next move could not be delayed. Throughout the afternoon, I observed my husband closely. He continued to maintain his routine, seemingly oblivious to my investigation, yet every small gesture, the way he positioned the box, the brief glances at certain drawers, the tension in his posture, revealed a careful orchestration of his own. The house, once a sanctuary, had become a stage for the quiet battle between truth and deception. As the hours ticked by, I grew more methodical. I inspected the locked closet repeatedly, checking for hidden compartments, loose panels, and anything that could provide additional clues. I examined floorboards, walls, and furniture for evidence of tampering. Each discovery, no matter how small, added weight to the realization that the secret was not just a minor lie, but a substantial deception, something that could shatter our lives if revealed. By late afternoon, the tension was nearly unbearable. I had cataloged dozens of documents, tracked patterns in my husband's behavior, and mapped the anomalies in the house. The pieces of the puzzle were nearly complete, and I sensed that the final revelation was imminent. I could no longer ignore the box or the closet. They were the epicenter of a secret that had been carefully hidden, a secret that would change everything in a matter of hours. I prepared myself for the next step, the critical moment when the truth would reveal itself. Every detail I had observed, every discrepancy I had noted, had led to this point. The house, the boxes, the documents, and my husband's careful movements had created a map, guiding me toward the final discovery. I knew that when I uncovered the truth, nothing would be the same. And so, with a mixture of fear and determination, I approached the private box. My hands trembled slightly as I set it on the table, careful not to disturb its position too abruptly. I opened it slowly, aware that every second counted, that the contents would confirm or shatter everything I believed about my husband and our life together. The first items I saw were documents I had expected, letters, financial papers, and photographs. But as I delved deeper, I uncovered evidence that was far more disturbing than I had imagined. The documents revealed not just hidden finances, but false identities, secret accounts, and transactions that suggested a pattern of deception and concealment spanning months. There were contracts in his name and in names I did not recognize, all tied to properties, accounts, and purchases I had never known about. The photographs were equally shocking. They showed him in locations and situations he had never mentioned, interacting with people whose existence I had been unaware of. The realization hit me with a force I could not have anticipated. Every detail in the box, every document and photograph, confirmed a disturbing truth. My husband had been living a double life. The life I thought we shared, the plans, the promises, the home we had just moved into, was only part of his story. There were layers hidden beneath the surface, carefully orchestrated and concealed, that now lay bare before me. I felt a mix of fear, anger, and disbelief. This was not just a secret. It was a breach of trust so profound that it threatened the foundation of everything I had believed about our marriage. I knew I had to act carefully. The evidence was delicate, yet undeniable. I photographed the documents, organized the papers, and began to piece together the sequence of events. Every phone call, every guarded glance, every unusual behavior I had noticed over the past 48 hours now made sense. The patterns were clear, the deception undeniable. My husband had built a secret world parallel to the one I thought we shared, and it was now fully exposed to me. The rest of the evening was spent in tense observation. My husband remained unaware of my discoveries, moving through the house as if everything were normal. I continued to catalog and organize, making sure that the evidence was preserved. The weight of the secret pressed on me, heavy and unrelenting. I realized that the next steps I took would determine not only the immediate confrontation, but also the future of our marriage, our finances, and our lives. As night fell, I sat in the living room, surrounded by the papers and photographs that revealed my husband's hidden life. The house, once a symbol of hope and new beginnings, now felt like a chamber of secrets. I reflected on the past 2 days, on the small anomalies and subtle clues that had led me to this moment. Each detail had been a sign. Each observation a step toward uncovering the truth. I understood that the coming hours would require courage and precision. The secret was no longer hidden, and the confrontation could not be delayed. The house was quiet, the night still, but my mind raced. I thought about the choices ahead, the confrontation that would inevitably come, and the irreversible consequences that would follow. The dance between truth and deception had reached its climax, and I was standing at the center, ready to uncover the final act. The morning of the second full day in the house arrived with a sense of inevitability. I had spent the previous hours meticulously cataloging the documents, photographs, and other evidence from the private box, but there was still more to uncover. The locked closet had remained untouched, an ominous presence in the hallway, and I knew that it held the key to fully understanding the secret I had just begun to unravel. Every step I took through the house felt deliberate, measured, each movement designed to avoid alerting my husband while simultaneously uncovering the truth. I began systematically unpacking the remaining boxes, treating each one as a potential source of clues. As I moved through the kitchen and living room, I noticed small, seemingly inconsequential details that I had previously overlooked. A corner of a rug was slightly lifted, revealing a faint scuff mark on the floor underneath. A drawer in the bedroom, previously thought to contain only miscellaneous items, had a false bottom, which I discovered by pressing on the surface and feeling it give slightly. Each of these discoveries heightened my anxiety, but also strengthened my resolve. By mid-morning, I had gathered enough evidence to form a clearer picture of my husband's hidden activities. The documents revealed a series of financial transactions in his name that I could not account for. They included large sums of money, moved between accounts I had never known existed, payments to unfamiliar companies, and correspondence with individuals whose names were unfamiliar. The realization that he had been hiding an entire financial world from me was staggering. I felt a surge of disbelief and betrayal, tempered by the growing sense that I was finally beginning to understand the magnitude of what had been concealed. As I moved to inspect the locked closet, I noticed my husband lingering near the doorway, pretending to tidy the hallway. His eyes flicked toward the box I had set on the table, and I could sense his tension, subtle but undeniable. He was aware that I was discovering something, and the careful control he had maintained over the past 48 hours was beginning to falter. I felt a mix of fear and determination, knowing that the next steps I took could not be delayed. I approached the closet cautiously, examining the lock. It was sturdy, but I had noticed subtle signs that it had been forced open in the past and carefully repaired. My hands hovered over the doorknob, the weight of anticipation pressing down on me. I realized that whatever lay inside could confirm the worst of my suspicions, and yet I felt compelled to uncover it. The house, once a place of promise, now felt like a stage set for revelation. I returned to the box briefly before opening the closet. Among the documents I had already uncovered were photographs that showed my husband in places I had never known, meeting with people whose identities were mysterious and whose intentions I could only guess. The letters suggested careful planning, a deliberate concealment of activities that had been ongoing for months. Each piece fit into a larger puzzle, and the missing piece, the contents of the locked closet, loomed over me, promising answers and a confrontation that I could not avoid. By midday, I had gathered enough courage to attempt opening the closet. The lock resisted at first, but with careful manipulation, I managed to open it just enough to peek inside. What I saw confirmed my fears. The space contained not only documents and personal items, but also objects that suggested a deeper, more troubling reality. There were binders filled with records, notebooks with cryptic notes, and envelopes marked with codes and symbols I did not understand. The sheer volume of information was overwhelming, and I realized that my husband had been meticulous in maintaining this hidden life. I began carefully photographing and cataloging the contents of the closet. Each document added another layer to the story I was piecing together. Receipts, contracts, and correspondence suggested that he had been involved in activities that went far beyond normal secrecy. The evidence pointed to a network of hidden dealings, carefully orchestrated and concealed from me. My mind raced with questions. How long had this been going on? Why had he involved me in none of it? And what did it mean for the life we had just begun together? As the afternoon wore on, my focus shifted from cataloging to understanding. I cross-referenced documents, examined dates and names, and tried to make sense of the patterns I saw. It became clear that this was not a minor deception, but a sustained, deliberate effort to maintain a double life. Every action he had taken, every phone call, every guarded movement over the past 48 hours suddenly made sense. I felt a mixture of anger, disbelief, and fear as the reality of the situation sank in. By late afternoon, I was exhausted but driven. I could not stop now. The final pieces of the puzzle were within reach. I noticed inconsistencies in the house itself, loose floorboards, hidden compartments, and areas that had been altered in ways that suggested prior use for purposes I could not yet fully understand. Each discovery added weight to the mounting realization that the life I had thought we shared was only a facade. The turning point came just as the sun began to dip toward the horizon. While examining the base of the hallway closet, I discovered a hidden latch that opened a small compartment. Inside were documents that revealed the most disturbing aspect of my husband's secret. Not only had he concealed a parallel financial and personal life, but he had also been involved in activities that were potentially illegal and morally reprehensible. Contracts, letters, and photographs pointed to actions he had taken to acquire the house, manipulate accounts, and maintain secrecy in ways that crossed ethical and legal boundaries. The weight of this discovery hit me with physical force. I felt my chest tighten, my stomach churn, and a wave of nausea that made it difficult to breathe. The house, the boxes, the locked closet, all had led to this moment. I realized that the man I thought I knew, the husband I had trusted completely, had been living a hidden life with ramifications that could destroy everything we had built. I sat down on the floor, surrounded by the documents, trying to process the full extent of what I had uncovered. Every phone call, every strange movement, every guarded glance now fit into a coherent pattern of deception and concealment. The realization that I had been living in a carefully constructed illusion for months, perhaps years, was both terrifying and liberating. I knew that the confrontation was inevitable and that the coming hours would determine the future of our marriage and our lives. By evening, I had documented every detail, photographed every document, and organized the evidence in a way that I could understand and present. My husband remained unaware of the extent of my discoveries, moving through the house as if nothing were amiss. The tension between us was now almost tangible, a silent awareness that both of us sensed but did not yet acknowledge. I prepared myself for the final confrontation. The evidence was irrefutable, the pattern of secrecy and deception clear. The house, once a symbol of new beginnings, had become a repository of truth, a place where hidden actions could no longer remain concealed. I knew that when I confronted him, everything would change instantly. The life I had imagined in Arizona, the trust I had placed in our relationship, and the sense of security I had felt since the move would be irrevocably altered. As night fell, I took one last look around the living room. The boxes had been unpacked, the closet contents documented, and the hidden compartments revealed. I understood that the next steps were critical. How I would confront him, how I would process the shock, and how I would protect myself and my future. The house was silent, but it was alive with the secrets that I had uncovered. The dance between truth and deception had reached its climax, and I was ready to face the final act. The early hours of the second night in the house were eerily quiet. I moved carefully from room to room, the weight of the private box in my mind pressing heavier with each step. Even after hours of sorting documents and cataloging photographs, There were still corners of the house I had yet to fully investigate. The locked closet, the baseboards, and the small compartments hidden beneath furniture still held pieces of the puzzle that could not be ignored. I felt as though the house itself was aware of my probing, creaking and sighing with every movement I made, a silent observer to the unraveling of secrets. I began with the bedrooms, searching for anomalies I might have missed. A drawer that seemed ordinary at first glance had a subtle double bottom, which I discovered by pressing carefully on the wooden surface. Inside were additional letters and receipts, some dated years back, suggesting that the hidden activities had been ongoing for a long time. The handwriting was familiar, my husband's, but the content was not. The realization that he had been meticulously hiding these details from me for so long left me feeling both betrayed and desperate to understand the full scope of the deception. As I moved to the living room, I noticed tiny imperfections I had not observed before. A faint scuff mark on the floor near the sofa, almost invisible, hinted at movement of heavy objects or secret compartments. A small dent on the wall near the fireplace, partially covered by a frame, suggested that something had been removed or hidden there. Each detail was subtle, but they were becoming impossible to ignore. Together they formed a trail that led directly to the secret I had begun to sense but could not yet fully confirm. I decided to focus on the private box again. Its contents had already revealed much, but intuition told me there was more. I pulled it carefully toward me and began inspecting every item. Documents, letters, photographs, and small notebooks revealed layers of planning, financial maneuvering, and hidden correspondence. There were names of people I did not recognize, addresses that were unfamiliar, and notes that hinted at activities beyond ordinary secrecy. I felt my pulse quicken. Every page I turned confirmed what I had suspected. My husband's life was far more complicated and concealed than I had ever imagined. Around midnight, a subtle shift occurred. My husband, who had been moving quietly through the house, paused near the hallway and glanced toward the living room. I froze, holding the box, pretending to sort papers casually. He lingered as if sensing my focus on the hidden items and then moved away. The tension between us was now tangible, a silent acknowledgement that neither of us could fully ignore. Every glance, every step, every movement was part of the dance of discovery and concealment that had defined the past 48 hours. I returned to the closet, determined to uncover the last of its secrets. I examined the lock and the doorframe carefully, looking for any weaknesses or points of entry. The faint sound of my husband moving in another room made me pause, heightening the suspense. I tried small manipulations of the lock, gentle movements that revealed a slight give, a hidden mechanism I had not noticed before. My hands trembled slightly, but I pressed on. The sense of anticipation was overwhelming. Within this closet, I sensed, lay the final piece of the puzzle, the key to understanding everything. While working, I noticed more subtle signs of a hidden life. The floorboards beneath the closet had minor scratches, the kind that suggested repeated access or movement of heavy items. Small dust marks indicated areas that had been recently disturbed, and faint odors suggested that items had been stored in secrecy for long periods. Each detail, seemingly insignificant on its own, added to a mounting realization. The house was filled with traces of a concealed world, meticulously maintained and carefully orchestrated. I spent hours cross-referencing the documents I had found. Dates, addresses, and names began to form a pattern that was almost impossible to ignore. Financial transactions, correspondence with unknown individuals, and receipts for purchases I had never been told about painted a picture of a hidden life that was deliberate and extensive. Every anomaly in the house now had context. Every strange phone call and secretive movement suddenly made sense. The pieces of the puzzle were coming together, and the image they revealed was both shocking and terrifying. As the night deepened, I moved through the house with heightened awareness. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of paper, every faint sound outside made me pause and consider the possibilities. The tension was relentless, each detail a reminder that the secret I sought was close and that the revelation could not be avoided. I felt a mixture of fear, anger, and determination, knowing that when the truth finally emerged, nothing would be the same. I focused next on small objects that might have been overlooked. A picture frame on a hallway table contained a photograph with a subtle discrepancy. Someone had been removed from the image, leaving a faint outline that suggested editing or manipulation. Small items tucked into drawers, envelopes hidden beneath books, and notes placed behind furniture all added to the growing body of evidence. My husband's careful orchestration of these items over time had created a labyrinth of secrecy that I was now navigating with methodical precision. The tension reached a peak as I uncovered a series of envelopes marked with codes. Each envelope contained documents that were critical, revealing transactions, correspondence, and evidence of concealed activity that could no longer be denied. I photographed each document carefully, arranging them in chronological order to reconstruct the sequence of events. The pattern was clear. My husband had created and maintained a parallel life, one that had been hidden beneath the surface of our shared existence. By the early morning hours, exhaustion began to weigh on me, but I pressed on. The house was quiet, the only sound my own movements, and the occasional creak of the floorboards. I returned to the closet one final time, examining every surface, every corner, every potential hiding spot. My determination was unwavering. I understood that the last pieces of the puzzle would reveal the full extent of the secret, and that once uncovered, there would be no turning back. Finally, in a small compartment hidden at the base of the closet, I discovered the most damning evidence yet. The documents, photographs, and notes revealed not just deception, but a disturbing level of premeditation. They showed that my husband had carefully constructed a secret world, managing finances, identities, and correspondence in a way that suggested deliberate concealment and potential legal violations. The depth of his secrecy left me reeling. I felt the weight of betrayal, the shock of discovery, and the clarity that our life together had been built on lies. I sat on the floor, surrounded by the evidence, and took a deep breath. Every phone call, every strange movement, every guarded glance over the past 48 hours suddenly made sense. I realized that the life I thought we shared had been only a facade, a carefully constructed illusion designed to conceal the truth. The house, the boxes, the closet, the documents, they all told a story I could no longer ignore. As dawn approached, I prepared for what I knew was inevitable. Confronting my husband with the evidence I had uncovered, the house, once a symbol of hope and new beginnings, had become a repository of secrets, a stage for the final act of revelation. The dance between concealment and discovery had reached its climax. I understood that the next steps I took would determine the future of our marriage, our home, and our lives. The morning light cut through the blinds, spilling across the living room floor where I'd spent the night surrounded by the evidence. The house was quiet, deceptively calm, as if it had been holding its breath in anticipation of what was to come. I could no longer ignore the truth. The documents, photographs, and hidden compartments had revealed everything. My husband's secret life was no longer a shadow at the edge of my awareness. It was fully visible, tangible, and undeniable. I reviewed the evidence one last time, ensuring that every detail was documented, photographed, and organized. The scope of what I had uncovered was staggering. There were accounts and other names, contracts for properties I had never known existed, and correspondence suggesting activities that were illegal and morally reprehensible. The pattern was clear. He had carefully constructed a hidden life, and the house, which I had believed to be our shared sanctuary, had been the repository for his concealment. I understood that the confrontation could no longer be delayed. Every phone call, every secretive glance, every guarded action over the past 48 hours had led to this moment. The weight of anticipation pressed on me, but beneath it lay a fierce determination. I knew what I had to do, and I knew that once I acted, nothing would ever be the same. I approached him quietly, finding him in the kitchen, seemingly preparing coffee. His movements were casual, but there was a tension beneath the surface, subtle and palpable. I took a deep breath, holding the organized evidence in my hands. The stack of documents was heavy, both physically and emotionally, each page a reminder of the betrayal that had been hidden from me. I placed the documents on the table, spreading them out methodically. My husband looked up, his eyes flicking to the papers with an expression I could not read. I could see the moment he realized that I had discovered everything. There was no preamble, no warning. The confrontation had begun. I calmly walked through the evidence, highlighting the accounts, contracts, and photographs that revealed his secret life. His face shifted through shock, denial, and anger in rapid succession. He tried to speak, to explain, but the weight of the documentation left him with no credible defense. Every attempt to deflect or justify collapsed under the undeniable facts before him. The life he had meticulously hidden was now fully exposed, and there was no way to conceal it further. I felt a mixture of anger and sadness as I observed him. The man I had trusted, the life I had believed in, had been built on a foundation of deception. The depth of his concealment was almost incomprehensible, stretching beyond mere secrets to a fully orchestrated hidden existence that impacted our finances, our home, and our future. The realization that our marriage had been underpinned by lies was both painful and liberating. I knew that I could not continue in this life, not after what I had discovered. I demanded that he explain every discrepancy, every hidden account, every secret correspondence. His responses were weak, inconsistent, and unconvincing. Each attempt to justify his actions only reinforced the evidence I had collected. The confrontation was intense, exhausting, and emotionally charged, but it was necessary. The truth could not remain buried any longer, and I could no longer pretend that our life together was what I had imagined. By mid-morning, it became clear that the marriage could not continue. The trust that had once formed its foundation was irreparably broken. I made the decision to leave the house immediately, taking only what I needed, and leaving behind the life that had been compromised by deception. The act of leaving was both painful and necessary. A physical and symbolic severance from the world my husband had hidden from me. I packed essential belongings quickly, moving through the rooms that had once felt like home with a sense of finality. Every box, every drawer, every closet held reminders of the hidden life I had uncovered. The house itself, once a symbol of new beginnings, now felt like a prison of secrets. I knew that staying would only prolong the inevitable confrontation with the consequences of his hidden actions. Once I was outside, the fresh air felt almost surreal. The house loomed behind me, a silent testament to the life that had been concealed. I knew that the next steps would involve legal separation and financial disentanglement, but for the moment the priority was distance and clarity. I felt the weight of betrayal, the ache of lost trust, and the sharp sting of realization that everything I had believed about my life had been false. In the days that followed, I took steps to secure my own safety and finances. The evidence I had gathered became crucial for legal proceedings, and I sought advice from professionals to navigate the separation process. The emotional toll was immense. I oscillated between disbelief, grief, and the focused determination to reclaim control over my life. Each step forward was a struggle, but the clarity provided by the evidence gave me a sense of agency that I had feared lost. My husband attempted to contact me to explain or plead, but I maintained firm boundaries. The confrontation had revealed the full extent of his deception, and I could not allow him to manipulate or interfere with the process. The documents, photographs, and hidden compartments had told the truth, and it was enough. The life we had built together could not continue, and I had to prioritize my own well-being above all else. Through the following weeks, I dealt with the practical and emotional fallout. Legal proceedings moved quickly once the evidence was presented, but the emotional scars remained. The betrayal cut deeply, leaving wounds that would not heal easily. I found support in friends and family who understood the gravity of the situation. But even with their help, the loss of trust and the disruption of my life were profound. Despite the devastation, there was also a sense of empowerment. I had uncovered the truth, acted decisively, and removed myself from a situation that was unsustainable. The house, the boxes, the documents, they had all been instruments of discovery and liberation. While the process had been painful, it had also reaffirmed my ability to protect myself and confront difficult realities. As the separation became final, I reflected on the rapid transformation of my life. In just 48 hours, the house had shifted from a symbol of new beginnings to the epicenter of betrayal and revelation. The speed of the discovery, the intensity of the confrontation, and the clarity of the evidence had reshaped my understanding of trust, marriage, and personal agency. I realized that while the loss was profound, the ability to face the truth was invaluable. I moved forward cautiously, rebuilding routines, establishing boundaries, and reclaiming control over my home and finances. The emotional aftermath was challenging, but the knowledge that I had uncovered the truth before it could cause further harm provided a measure of relief. The house, though no longer a home in the way I had imagined, became a symbol of my resilience and determination to confront reality, no matter how painful. The final impact of the discovery extended beyond practical matters. It reshaped my perception of relationships, trust, and the importance of vigilance. The betrayal had been profound, but it had also taught me to pay attention to subtle signs, to trust intuition, and to act decisively when confronted with evidence of deception. The lessons were harsh, but they were real and necessary. Looking back, the 48 hours after the move were the most intense and transformative of my life. The process of unpacking, observing, investigating, and confronting the hidden truths had left an indelible mark. The house, the boxes, and the documents had revealed a world I had never imagined, and navigating that world required courage, clarity, and decisive action. In the end, I emerged with the knowledge of the truth, the strength to act, and the resolve to reclaim my life. The confrontation with my husband was a pivotal moment, marking the end of a life built on deception and the beginning of a journey toward independence and self-protection. The evidence had been irrefutable, the revelation undeniable, and the consequences immediate and irreversible. As the second night deepened, I returned once more to the closet and the private box. I could feel the gravity of the moment pressing down on me. Each time I examined its contents, the magnitude of the hidden world my husband had been living became clearer. The documents I had previously uncovered were only the tip of the iceberg. There were ledgers tucked into folders that revealed transactions far beyond ordinary financial management. Large sums of money had been moved through accounts under different names, and some transfers were linked to properties I had never heard of, some even in other states. It became evident that he had been building a network of assets entirely hidden from me, but it was the letters and notebooks that sent the shockwaves through me. Some were addressed to people with pseudonyms. Others referenced dates and locations that didn't make sense at first glance. A careful reading revealed coded language. What initially seemed like mundane correspondence now hinted at clandestine meetings, deliberate concealment, and possibly illegal dealings. He had mapped out a secret life with precision, documenting actions, instructions, and exchanges that I could only begin to comprehend. My stomach twisted as I realized that I had been married to someone leading an entirely parallel existence. Among the papers, I discovered a series of photographs that chilled me to the bone. Some showed him at unfamiliar locations, buildings that looked official, almost corporate, and in some cases, others were blurred or masked in ways that suggested he didn't want them identified. Others depicted him handling large quantities of cash, meeting with people I did not know, and signing documents in secrecy. The images were deliberate and methodical and damning. They painted a picture of someone orchestrating a secret world while maintaining the illusion of a normal life at home. I also found a small USB drive tucked into an envelope labeled simply with a date. My hands shook as I plugged it into my laptop. The files contained spreadsheets, emails, and scanned documents that detailed even more of his hidden dealings. Some were legal in nature, while others suggested manipulation, evasion, and falsified records. There were contracts signed under aliases, evidence of property transactions that circumvented standard channels, and financial strategies that were clearly intended to conceal assets from anyone, me included. I could feel my heart pounding as the web of deceit became almost suffocating in its complexity. Even more disturbing were the personal notes. In them, he reflected on his actions in a way that made me feel betrayed to my core. There was no remorse, only cold calculation. He had written about timing, about managing perception, and about controlling the narrative if anyone ever discovered his secret. The words were clinical, almost detached, but each one confirmed that this had been premeditated, deliberate, and maintained for months or even years. I felt the crushing weight of betrayal, realizing that everything I thought I knew about our life together had been carefully staged. My investigation led me to hidden compartments I had missed before. Underneath the baseboards in the hallway, behind the molding, I found envelopes containing receipts and correspondence that tied him to untraceable accounts. There were letters from lawyers in other states, notifications of property transfers, and even notes suggesting previous identities he had used. The extent of his hidden life was staggering. The realization hit me. He had constructed an entire alternate existence, one that I had no access to, and that now threatened to dismantle everything I had worked for. In one of the folders, I discovered a set of documents that directly contradicted what he had told me about the house we had just moved into. There were contracts showing he had acquired it through complex financial maneuvers that were never disclosed. Some transfers appeared to skirt legal boundaries, and others were tied to loans or payments I had never been told about. He had purchased this house not just with secrecy, but with intent to shield parts of his life from me. It was no longer a sanctuary. It was a carefully curated stage for his deception. The more I uncovered, the more I realized the timeline of his hidden activities. Dates and receipts indicated that he had planned this move meticulously, ensuring that everything would align perfectly to maintain the illusion of normalcy. Every phone call I had questioned, every secretive glance, every moment of protectiveness over certain boxes or rooms suddenly made sense. It was no longer paranoia. It was fact. The double life was methodical, premeditated, and now fully exposed to me. The photographs also contained a disturbing personal element. There were images of a woman I did not recognize, always blurred or partially hidden, but enough to suggest a connection. Correspondence hinted that she might have been part of the secret world he had maintained, someone involved in financial dealings, meetings, or arrangements I had never been privy to. My mind raced with questions. Who was she? How long had she been part of his life? And what role did I unknowingly play in concealing it? The uncertainty and betrayal coiled inside me like a physical force, tightening with each passing minute. I spent hours cross-referencing every document, every photograph, every note. Patterns emerged that made the scope of his deception undeniable. He had been planning for years, not just to hide assets and accounts, but to maintain control over every aspect of his life, including what I could see and what I could not. Every lie, every omission, every manipulated truth now fit into a coherent but terrifying narrative. The man I had trusted implicitly was a stranger in my own home. By the early hours of the next morning, I had reached a breaking point. I had collected irrefutable evidence of hidden identities, concealed finances, and deliberate manipulations. The documents, photographs, and hidden compartments all pointed to a life he had been living parallel to the one I thought we shared. The revelation was suffocating, yet it also brought clarity. I knew that confrontation was inevitable, and that the next steps I took would determine not only the immediate outcome, but the trajectory of my entire life. I prepared the evidence meticulously, arranging it in a way that made sense and could not be denied. Each photograph, each document, each note was placed with intention. I photographed everything, ensuring a digital record existed in case it was ever contested. I documented the hidden compartments, the concealed folders, and even the small inconsistencies in the house that had previously seemed trivial. Every detail now had meaning. Every anomaly now had context, and every secret was now revealed. As dawn approached, I realized that confrontation could no longer wait. The evidence was too extensive to ignore, and the deception too profound to continue living with. The house, once a symbol of hope, had become a chamber of truths, and I knew that presenting them to him would end our life together as we knew it. I felt a mixture of fear, anger, and determination. This was the final step in the dance of discovery. I called him to the living room, my hands steady even as my heart raced. The documents and photographs lay spread across the table, irrefutable in their scope. He looked at me, confusion and unease flickering across his face. But I could see it, the recognition that I had uncovered everything. The confrontation was unavoidable, and the truth, now fully documented, would demand answers he could no longer avoid. The morning light poured into the living room, illuminating every document, photograph, and hidden note I had uncovered. The house felt strangely oppressive, heavy with the weight of the secrets that had been hiding within its walls. For 48 hours, I had moved through the rooms, uncovering layer after layer of my husband's deception, and now the truth was fully visible before me. It was no longer a shadow at the edge of my awareness. It was a tangible, undeniable reality. I took a deep breath and reviewed the evidence one last time. Every photograph, every receipt, every note confirmed that my husband had been living a life I had never known. There were accounts in other names, contracts for properties I had no knowledge of, correspondence with unknown individuals, and financial records that suggested careful concealment and manipulation. The scale of his hidden world was staggering. He had meticulously constructed a parallel existence, one that had nothing to do with the life he showed me. The photographs were particularly disturbing. Some depicted him in meetings with people I did not recognize, handling large sums of cash, and signing documents in secrecy. Others showed a woman I had never met, always blurred or partially hidden, suggesting a connection to the hidden activities he had maintained. There were also images of locations I could not identify, buildings that appeared official, almost corporate, hinting at financial or legal dealings that I had been entirely excluded from. The letters and notebooks revealed cold calculation. He had documented dates, locations, and instructions with meticulous precision. The notes indicated planning, concealment, and control over the narrative if anyone discovered the truth. There was no remorse in his words, no hint of empathy or regret, only a calculated effort to maintain secrecy and protect his hidden life. I felt a surge of anger and betrayal so intense it physically shook me. The man I had trusted completely had been orchestrating a life I had never been allowed to see. I moved toward the kitchen where he was quietly making coffee, his movements casual but tense. I could see him register the presence of the documents spread across the table. There was a flicker of recognition in his eyes, a subtle acknowledgement that I had uncovered everything. I placed the photographs and notes in front of him, spreading them out methodically. There was no preamble. There was no warning. The confrontation had begun. I walked him through the evidence, calmly but deliberately pointing to accounts, contracts, photographs, and correspondence that revealed the full extent of his hidden life. I watched his expression shift from confusion to denial to anger, each reaction failing against the weight of irrefutable proof. He attempted to explain, to justify, to manipulate the narrative, but every claim collapsed under the clarity of the documents. There was nowhere to hide, no way to evade the truth. As I spoke, I realized that the trust that had formed the foundation of our marriage was irreparably broken. Everything we had built together, from our move to this new home in Arizona, had been constructed on a foundation of lies. The realization was crushing. I felt the sting of betrayal, the ache of lost intimacy, and the sharp, undeniable clarity that our life together could not continue. The deception was too profound, too deliberate, and too comprehensive to ignore. I demanded that he explain every account, every hidden property, every pseudonym, and every mysterious correspondence. His responses were weak, inconsistent, and unconvincing. Every attempt to rationalize or minimize his actions only confirmed the reality I already knew. He had maintained a secret life that was both deliberate and sustained over time. The depth of the betrayal left me reeling, and yet, amidst the shock, I felt a sense of resolve. I knew what had to be done. By late morning, it became clear that our marriage could not survive. The evidence was too damning, the deception too profound, and the trust too shattered. I made the decision to leave the house immediately, taking only essentials and leaving behind the life that had been compromised. The act of leaving was symbolic as well as practical, a severance from the man I had loved and the world he had hidden from me. The house, once a symbol of new beginnings, now felt like a prison of secrets, and I knew that staying would only prolong the inevitable. I packed quickly, moving through the rooms with determination. Each box I touched, each drawer I emptied reminded me of the hidden life I had uncovered. The documents, the photographs, the hidden compartments, they had all told the truth, and now I had to act on it. I carried the evidence with me, knowing it would be crucial for legal proceedings and necessary to protect myself. Once outside, the air felt almost unreal. The house loomed behind me, silent and still, but heavy with the weight of the revelations it had contained. I felt a mix of relief, grief, and disbelief. The confrontation had been exhausting, emotionally and physically, but the clarity of the evidence left me with no doubt. The life I had thought I shared with my husband had been an elaborate facade, and I had removed myself from it just in time. In the following days, I focused on practical matters. I contacted professionals to handle the legal separation, ensuring that the hidden assets and accounts could be addressed properly. I secured my finances, my home, and my personal safety. The emotional toll was immense, but I relied on friends and trusted family members to navigate the storm. Each step forward was painful, but the certainty of the truth provided a measure of strength. The consequences were swift. My husband attempted to contact me repeatedly, but I maintained strict boundaries. The confrontation had revealed everything, and I could not allow him to manipulate the situation further. Every phone call, every text, every attempt at explanation reminded me of the betrayal I had uncovered. The documentation, the photographs, and the hidden compartments had told the truth, and that truth could not be denied or rewritten. Throughout the separation process, I reflected on the rapid transformation of my life. In just 48 hours, the house had shifted from a symbol of hope and possibility to the epicenter of deception and betrayal. The evidence had been overwhelming, the confrontation intense, and the consequences immediate and irrevocable. I realized that while the loss was profound, the ability to uncover the truth and act decisively had been invaluable. I rebuilt my routines carefully, establishing boundaries and reclaiming control over my life. The emotional scars were deep, but the clarity and empowerment gained from uncovering the truth gave me resilience. The house, though no longer a home in the sense I had imagined, became a symbol of my ability to confront reality, even when it was painful. The deception had been massive, but facing it allowed me to reclaim agency and protect my future. Even as the weeks passed, the lessons of those 48 hours remained clear. Trust must be earned and maintained. Vigilance is essential, and secrets can unravel the lives of everyone involved. The speed of the discovery, the intensity of the confrontation, and the clarity of the evidence had reshaped my understanding of relationships, truth, and self-preservation. I knew that the path ahead would be difficult, but I also knew that I had the strength to navigate it. Please tell me in the comments section if I was right or wrong to expose his secret so quickly, because that decision didn't just end a marriage, it ended the life I thought I had and every relationship built on it. In 48 hours, I lost my home, my trust, and the man I believed I knew. But maybe in facing the truth, I finally found myself,